You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. We in here, says the pro-Black perspective. The learning curve with the revolutionary matron says greetings. We are about this. We're in here. Speaking of that, before I continue with tonight's reading, just want to remind you guys, this podcast is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. You should be tuning into the other shows on the network.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-Black perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to check out all of those shows. They're in the chat room for the most part, representing. Make sure to tune into the Pro-Black Perspective tomorrow morning as he continues reading Wretched of the Earth, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune into the Revolutionary Matron, who should be on tomorrow at 6:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. She might actually be on tonight. So make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to subscribe to all the channels, like the content, click the bell to be notified when they're live. And if you haven't done that for me, you know what you got to do. You got to do it for me as well. All right, make sure to check out all of those shows. So tonight, I want to try to get through this reading kind of quick while I still have these pain medications working. I have a tooth issue here that's really bad, so let me try to get through this. As always, if you're live with me, or if you listen to the playback, post comments, leave a comment. I'll answer those comments offline. If you're live with me, I'll read the comments on air live, and we'll chop it up together. This paper is called The Black Self-Concept, Some Historical, Theoretical Reflections, written by William David Smith, University of Cincinnati. It starts like this: to understand the Negro self-image, self-concept, and who am I problems, we must go back to the time of birth and creation of the American Negro, quote-unquote American Negro. Over 300 years ago, Black men, women, and children were extracted from their native Africa, stripped bare both psychologically and physically, and placed in an alien white land. The most tragic yet predictable part of all of this is that the Negro has come to form his self-image, self-concept, on the basis of what white racists have prescribed. Wonder which Africans in America have done that. Right? Describe themselves with the terminology that white folks have given. If you guys could come up with a group or two that's done that, you guys let me know in the chat. There have been many writers in the last few years that have discussed factors related to the formation of the Black personality. However, too few writers have discussed one of the most important concepts of the Black personality, namely the black self concept. A summary of the research studies reviewed indicates that there have been many different types of investigations examining the black self concept. The results of the search are varied and inconclusive. Findings of an early study by Clark and Clark in 1939 showed that black children preferred white characteristics over black characteristics. Another study by Clark and Clark in 1947 showed similar results. These results are typical of many studies conducted from the late 1930s through part of the 1960s. Today, there are more studies which show blacks accepting their own characteristics and having a positive self-concept. Examples are Ward in 72, Myers in 67, Felice in 1974, Powell in 73, and Attenborough and Zepp, not determined what year that is. Self-concept plays a significant role in the way a person views things. It provides a person with an inner direction, a map or a compass as to which route one's life should travel. In many instances, people act according to what others think of them. They permit others to define what their behavior should be, and they act accordingly. How many of you know people like that? To continue, they are told, quote unquote, told how to view themselves, the self-concept. In other instances, people are forced to look at themselves in a certain way. This latter situation occurred in slavery. White Americans instituted slavery in the colonies in the 1600s as a profit-making venture. To justify their conscience and their inhumane treatment of black people, whites were supposed to have been Christians at the time, by the way, white leaders passed laws and conditioned other whites to think as they thought about black people. Slave self-concepts were hampered by these laws. By the way, if you look at America right now, to this day, if you look at it today, we live very segregated lives from white folks, but yet they all seemingly have the same outlook on black folks, even though they have never been around black folks. It's a cultural transmission thing, right? And the genesis of it starts here with a paper it's talking about, like, they had to create these perceptions of Africans to justify their bullshit to themselves. Black people, slave concepts were hampered by these laws. Laws helped to provide a psychological environment for slave owners and others to determine the behavior of slaves, and consequently affected the slaves' views of themselves. These early laws stated that slaves could not defend themselves against whites, that they could not meet in groups unless a white person was present. Even though slavery has been abolished over 100 years and this law is currently illegal, there are still a significant number of non-blacks who wish to deny blacks the right to meet in groups of 3 or more, and that's a fact. That they could not make contracts to purchase, that they could not marry, and that they must produce a pass anytime a white man challenged them. I think I heard the pro-black perspective mention that earlier today. Right? These are just a few of the democratic laws. Since most leading officials had negative feelings about slaves or derived negative feelings based on these laws, it was relatively easy for them to convince others of how slaves really were. Attitudes of white leadership were exemplified by George Washington, who felt that slaves were inferior, and Thomas Jefferson, who said that, quote, slaves in memory are equal to whites, in reason much inferior, and in imagination they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous, end of quote. These presidential attitudes of slaves were very mild compared with the brutal treatment rendered to slaves by so-called masters. Contrary to the beliefs of many, the slaves were individuals who fought and reacted differently to the institution of slavery. These behavioral reactions to the conditions of slavery reflect their self-concepts. One group of slaves refused to be part of the quote-unquote slavery system or let their families be part of the system. They killed their families and themselves rather than being subjected to the dehumanizing experiences of slavery. Their concept of themselves was that they should not be slaves. They saw themselves as intelligent, being able to achieve. Another group of slaves rebelled and initiated revolts, confrontations, and skirmishes concerning their freedom. These slaves were caught and killed for their actions. These slaves had positive self-concepts and knew that the master was not superior to them and that they must demand their freedom or they would not become free people. Let me read that one more again. These slaves were caught and killed for their action. These slaves had positive self-concepts, knew that the master, the so-called master, was not superior to them. They must demand their freedom or they would not become free people. One example is Nat Turner. Pro-Black Perspective talked about Birth of a Nation, the Birth of a Nation movie by Nate Parker when he did the interview with Alma Bookman, right? One example is Nat Turner. A third group of slaves protested, but feared the loss of their lives and therefore tried to work, quote unquote, within the system to get their freedom. How many within the system Negroes are you familiar with? Right? How many within the system, quote unquote, within the system Negroes are you aware of? Right? I'm sure the answer is many. Many men, right? Does this sound familiar? Still, a fourth group of slaves felt depressed, dejected, and helpless to overcome the quote-unquote slave conditions, and therefore tried to cooperate and do whatever the master told them, including administering inhumane treatment to other slaves. These last two groups of slaves had concepts of themselves as having to be at least partially cooperative or having their selves destroyed by the master. They had been conditioned to believe that their selves were important only if they identified with the master, and that their interests and the master's were one and the same. Therefore, they attempted to imitate him in order to gain acceptance by him, as well as by fellow slaves. How does this compare with black behavior today? You guys tell me in the chat room. How does this compare with black behavior today? Right? So there's these four types of Negroes that this paper just detailed. How does this compare with black behavior today? These last two characters. Right? To continue, there were no collective self-concepts which indicated that all slaves thought of themselves as inferior, shiftless, worthless, or lazy, as racist writers have depicted them. How many times have you heard the statement, quote, "Niggas ain't shit," end of quote? Who do you think planted it in black minds? It is disgustingly clear that slaves felled the trees, helped cultivate the land, nursed and raised the white man's babies, while not being given sufficient time to raise their own children properly. And that's today what happens with the school system, right? A lot of teachers, black women, and black men are in these schools teaching these people's children and don't have the bandwidth to go home and do the right thing by their own children. All right? Let me read that again. Who do you think planted it in black minds? It is disgustingly clear that slaves felled the trees, helped cultivate the land, nursed and raised the white man's babies, while not being given sufficient time to raise their own children properly, rendered thousands of other tasks too numerous to mention in this article, and historically helped build this country. After rendering this type of service to the country, slaves were then told that the white man's evaluation of themselves was that they were of no value except to work for him. That's college for you too, by the way. Your value as a college graduate is to work for him. Self-concept is learned through interactions with others. And like a flower, it unfolds as the child develops. The black child in slavery was subjected to brutal and distorted experiences which did not permit him or her to realize the potentiality of his or her self-perceptions. The so-called master, as we have come to learn, forced his definitions of black people on the slaves, indicated that he owned the selves of all slaves. He not only defined what the black self-concept was, but punished those slaves who refused to accept his definition. When you read this stuff, if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that you're still on a plantation. For instance, right? That last line says, but punish those slaves who refuse to accept his definition. So I refuse to accept the definition. The Bitter Medicine podcast refuses to accept that definition. The other shows on KWAZ refuses to accept that definition. And what happens? In particular, I can speak for my show in particular. What happens? YouTube is always screwing with my stream. Right? It's a punishment. Right? It's a punishment. Similarly, he rewarded those slaves who did not accept his definitions of their self-concepts and therefore behave like good slaves or good niggas. What was the criterion for good behavior? Whatever the master thought was good. What was the yardstick for measuring bad behavior? Whatever behavior the master thought was bad behavior. The master's assessment of excellent, good, fair, poor behavior was based solely on his subjective whims. These false definitions of the self-concept of slaves, which were to be generalized to all black people for well over the next 300 years, and the traumas that occurred thereafter, have caused extensive psychological problems which still exist today. Right? This is also true when you look at working for white folks. When you look at working for white folks, you are really at the subjective whims of this cracker who you work for. If his wife denied him some the night before, he might come in there in the morning and carry on like a damn fool with you at work. We're still on a plantation. Right? Before I continue, let me check the chat. The chat has been active. The Revolutionary Matron says all native-born Africans, you know, ADOS and FBA, right? Yeah, those are the groups to this day, says the pro-black perspective. The learning curve with the Revolutionary Matron says propaganda is real. It goes on to say the algorithm tries to facilitate this. It's their tool. Right? Speaking of YouTube, I assume. Mr. Untouchable is here. Thanks for coming through, Mr. Untouchable. I think I saw Mr. Untouchable on the Revolutionary Matrons live show recently, so thanks for coming through. Mr. Untouchable says, we have Karens, male and female, still ask black people to see their papers. Yeah, that's all that Karen stuff you see. You know, like I told you guys before, I used to play out music back in the day. And I observed, like, you'll be outside waiting to go, you know, waiting your turn to go play or whatever. And you'll see young, old, in between. You'll see old white folks could barely walk, walking slowly by, and they see a group of black folks in a building, and they want to know what's going on. They want to be able to go inside. They want to come and ask you what's going on here. You know, to this day. You know, Mr. Untouchable says death before dishonor. Revolutionary Matron says to Mr. Untouchable, facts to this day. Revolutionary Matron says Gabriel Prosser is another example. Like, you know, that's going back to when I mentioned that term. Right? Mr. Untouchable says we still have the three types to this day. Revolutionary Matron says working within NECR works, but it is counterproductive. Working within NECR works is counterproductive. Mr. Untouchable says, what is the name of this book? It's fascinating. Oh, the Matron said it's never. Okay, working within never works. Oh yeah, those working from within Negroes, that, trust me, they've been talking about that shit since 1865. Right? Never works. Revolutionary Matron says this is the same behavior today, just like Mr. Untouchable said. Revolutionary Matron says absolutely is not change, it evolved. Mr. Untouchable says meritorious manumission. Yes. Yes. Mr. Untouchable asks about a book. Were you referring to this reading right now? This is not a book. This is a journal article that I'm reading. If you want it, join the Discord. I have the Discord pinned at the top of the chat. Join the Discord. As soon as you land in the Discord, just ask the question, how do I get the paper from the last episode of the podcast? And I'll get that right too. All right. Shall I proceed? Yes, indeed. So here we go. We as a people are not psychologically free. It is very disturbing to be denied the right to experience yourself and thereby define yourself as you appear to you. This disturbance often leads to mental disorders. A slave looked in the mirror and discovered his or her beautiful black self. But before he or she could thoroughly evaluate what he or she saw, the slave owner broke the mirror of the slave and replaced it with one which reflected a white image every time the slave stood before it. Today, although the slave owner mentality is still with us on a more sophisticated basis, we have developed our concepts of ourselves differently from what was done during and immediately after slavery. I believe that one can theorize on the development of the black self concept. Before advancing my theory, it is very clear to me that when any writer discusses anything about black Americans, he or she should be reminded of W.E.B. Du Bois's comment that the problem of the 20th century will be the problem of the color line. How many times have you heard or read this statement? Obviously, Du Bois was correct. The color line always has played and always will play a major role in the formation of the black self concept. I shall amplify tersely on this statement. I believe that the problems of the 21st century, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, ad infinitum centuries will also be the problems of the color line. Year 3000, black people certainly will have made progress and be in better situations than we are today. But I still believe that there will be problems that will be centered in the color line. The minds of most people in the country are conditioned to think a certain way about black people. Each generation of people continue to pass on those beliefs about black people to the succeeding generations. When there are exceptional white people, or black people for that matter, who dare to think differently about black people, they are punished by other white people. Thus, the development of the black self-concept will always be greatly affected by the way black and whites perceive skin color. Now on to the theory. right? I mean, that's just facts. We just said, I have explained my theory of the black self-concept in numerous propositions listed below. I believe that most, if not all, self-concepts of black people can be seen in these propositions. I further believe that all black people have concepts of themselves. So we're going to go through a list of his propositions here. We're going to go through a list of his propositions here. You guys tell me how you feel about each proposition. All right? If you're live with me, you could type the number of the proposition and then your thought on the proposition. So for proposition 1, type a 1, and then your thought on it, right? And we'll do that for each proposition. Proposition 1, there is a physical concept, a psychological concept, and a social or cultural concept. Elsewhere, I have given specific definitions of the black self-concept. The interested reader is referred to Smith, 1975. Right? What the black physical concept is composed of depends to a degree on the individual's value of the physical self. Generally, the components of the physical self-concept are A, the hair, B, skin, C, nose, and D, lips, and E, general appearance. In addition to these general components, some people chose to include sexual parts, mostly men. Others tend to be concerned about body weight and shape. Proposition 2. The components of the psychological concept are A, an evaluation of self-worth, B, self-attitude about life, C, self-love, D, self-pride, E, self-abilities, F, self-achievements, G, self-power and heredity, H, general perceptions, and I, general value system. So that's proposition 1 and 2. Proposition 1 about the physical concept, proposition 2 about the psychological concept, and our proposition 3, the components of the social or cultural self-concept, consists of A, developing survival skills, B, developing social skills, an understanding of societal norms, C, creating, using, and understanding the black language and black vernacular, and D, developing that certain way of relating to other blacks. These 3 main parts of the black self-concept work simultaneously as the individual deals with environmental experiences. The various segments of the environment encountered by the individual significantly influences the development of the black self-concept. How do you guys feel about those 3 concepts? Right? How do you guys feel about the psychological concept, and the social/cultural self-concept? Do you think those concepts, those propositions are sound? Do you think they're lacking in any way? You guys let me know how you feel. I'll read the comments in a few. So let's bring us to proposition 4. The self-concepts of all black people are based on varying proportions of the color of their experiences. Proposition 5. The color of black people's experiences are either black or white. They are either positive or negative. Proposition 6. Each black person is influenced by and therefore selects consciously or unconsciously a ratio of black experiences and white experiences to formulate his or her self-concept. Proposition 7. Each black person is influenced by 1, school, 2, parents, 3, church, 4, work settings, 5, friends, 6, general community, and 7, significant others. School, parents, and significant others often play the key roles in the development of black self-concept. School for sure. Parents, okay. Significant others. You know, that's the thing. I don't know if people today allow their significant others to play a key role in the development of their self-concept. Do you guys think that people today allow significant others to play a key role in their self-concept, or do you think people come to relationships with what they have, and that's it? Before I read Proposition 8, 9, etc., we pause here for a quick station ID. On the other side, I'll read your comments, questions, etc.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to check out all those shows on the network. Check out all of those shows on the network. The revolutionary matron in chat says, we women think that black men don't love black women. To this day, this is the trick. Yep, that is the trick. This is why we can't really advance. We have too much internal conflicts that have been ignited by our enemies. Like this paper said earlier, when they talked about N-words ain't shit. Why do you know, who told them that? Right? You know, like Malcolm X said, who taught you? Right? Who taught you to hate yourself? To hate the color of your skin, to hate the texture of your hair. Right? These are outsiders creating these problems, and we fall for it time and time again. So much so, we fall into it. I was reading, in my research, I was reading this short paper yesterday, and this white boy was talking about, back in the day too, this white boy, we're talking like, you know, this paper was almost 100 years old. And this white boy was talking about how to colonize people. And he was talking about colonization in relations to different groups, and how basically he was saying with Africans, it was easy to colonize Africans. And of course, he used all the white nationalist type, white supremacist type talking points. Africans are dull and all this old shit. But sometimes when you look at Africans today, and when I say Africans, I mean all of us, black equals African, all of us in the diaspora, on the continent, etc. Sometimes you look at our people and you wonder, man, maybe we are dumb. Not because the white boy said it, but because of what you see going on out here. One of the things this white boy was talking about in that paper that I read yesterday, which I found interesting, he said that the things that they were able to pull off in Africa, you couldn't do it to the Indian. The Romans couldn't do it to the British. And he mentioned a couple other groups that you couldn't do it to. Like, I mean, essentially he was saying that Africans in that time, when the Europeans figured out they used shells, cowrie shells, for currency, essentially Europeans went to the east coast of Africa where cowrie shells were in abundance, and they took it back to West Africa, and they had all this capital, right? And he said even when guns were traded to Africans, they were guns that were already no good, defective, old technology. And he made it a point to say you couldn't do that in India. You couldn't do that in Britain. Now, again, propaganda writing. But what I'm trying to get at is that when I look at the stuff that black folks fall for today, it reminds me of those writings from way back in the day. And I gotta wonder what's really going on with black folks that we fall for the same trickery, fuckery that we fall for. This is why I push for black accountability. We have to start being more accountable for our actions. Right? We have to be accountable for our actions, the way we think about things, the way we do things, and the outcomes. We have to start being more accountable for that. I think one of the things that hurts us, by the way, is a lot of us, the belly of us, blame everything on white folks. And I'm not absolving white folks from the bullshit. But we have to start working on ourselves, our self-concepts. We have to have a do for self mentality. Revolutionary Matron says the quote unquote clever people, wise trader, that is an upright businessman, will mess up an African every time. You know, it's funny, Matron, it's almost like you read the same paper that this writer used similar terms, right? The wise trader, the clever people, right? Matron goes on to say we are honest people and we have hope. And you know, we've been saying that we are honest people with hope. We've been saying that for like 400 or 500 years now. We got to stop that now. We have to become more cunning and more skilled, more socially adept. It's time for us to change that up now. And that's why I said we got to be more accountable. If you did business, I remember reading in Carlos Cook's reader, you know, and I knew about this already, but even in Carlos Cook's reader, he talked about how the white man, while measuring meat for sale, will put his thumb on the scale, right? If you know these guys are going to put their thumb on the scale to make the thing seem heavier, you got to call them out on that bullshit. You don't just pay for something that's not its true weight. So they will always try you. You got to try them back, you know. Anyway, to continue. Proposition 8, the resulting ratio of selective positive black and positive white experiences that go to form the black self-concept is directly proportional to the ones that impress the particular blacks the most. That's interesting. Okay. Proposition 9. The black or white experiences that impress blacks the most are those that add to or are perceived as adding to the self-worth of the individual. Proposition 10. If the percentage of white positive experiences that impress the black organism is higher than the percentage of positive black experiences, then the black organism will formulate a white self-concept, thereby deny self-acceptance and deny acceptance of other blacks also. You know, this is what you see from guys like Tommy Sotomayor, right? When he jumps on his YouTube channel talking shit about black women and black people in general, right? He gets something, right? He gets something that he perceives as positive experience, right? He gets more of that from white folks and black folks. And that alone is what fuels him to go on. That and the cash donations that they give, right? And I suspect guys like that were like that from high school or college because a black woman or something denied them access, you know, romantically or something. All of those little things you have to be mindful of. All of those little things you have to be mindful of, right? Proposition 11. Conversely, if the percentage of positive black experiences that impress the black organism is higher than the percentage of positive white experiences, then the black organism will formulate a black self-concept, thereby accept self and accept other blacks also. So that's an important one right there, right? Every day we live, that's you, me, that's people outside, we're supposed to be creating positive experiences with the people, with ourselves and the people, the black people around us. When you don't create positive experiences with yourself and the people around you, that too will get the sellouts, will create the sellouts that you see around black society. Like I'll tell you, almost every other day on Twitter, I see, and oftentimes it's black women, but not just them, but I see this lashing out towards black men. In fact, I talked about it a couple weeks ago. This is a particular black woman who was writing about how violent black men are, how trash they are, and how black women need not support them. And they pull these stats, and I think D. Webb was in that too. This person pulled these stats about black men and the levels of crime and violence and all that stuff. Listen, if she grew up in a house, to use an Onitase example, if she grew up in a house where her black father was beating her black mother, that could lead to that kind of outburst. If she grew up in a high crime area and she witnessed friends dying in random acts of silly violence in black society, that could create that kind of mindset. We have to be intentional and particular about how we carry ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we see others, and how we carry ourselves around others. Or else we're going to create the people who are going to go over, who are going to become, as the pro-black perspective says, the Ascari. Here's the thing about that too. You could end up losing really good problem solvers. You could end up losing people who were really charismatic and could be great organizers and spread this message of Pan-Africanism and the benefits and the rewards. But you lost that person because all they ever got around their own people, not all, but most of what they got is negative experiences. We have to be mindful of these things. KW Don 7 is with us today. KW Don 7 says, you had white male appreciation day on Clubhouse. Shaking my damn head. Yeah, I saw Jamel Hill tweet out a picture with her and a white boy back in the day. It must be for prom or wedding or something. And then recently she said some shit like Harrison Ford was a zaddy. And that's all I needed to. I'm done with Jamel Hill completely. I've tried with Jamel Hill. I am done with Jamel Hill. Right? But this is the kind of thing you could get. You could get this white male appreciation bullshit because some of these folks were around black males who weren't shit, who didn't treat them right, who didn't do right by them. We have to be very mindful. And so the thing you want to focus on is being the best example of an African that you can possibly be. Proposition 12, if the percentage of positive black experiences that impress the black organism is equal to the percentage of positive white experiences, then the black organism will formulate a black-white self-concept. This is why when you talk about nationhood, and this is why you have to close ranks. You don't want it to be like those Africans on the continent who were parading around a white boy because he looked like, quote unquote, Jesus. Right? You want a race first ideology preceding any kind of nation building that you're thinking about doing. Dorico Cooper Photography is here saying, peace, family. Peace to Dorico Cooper. I will see you in a minute. Good to see you out here again. All right. Proposition 13. The self-concept is private. Only the individual really knows how he or she defines his or herself. Proposition 14. The major negative experiences that the black organism experiences that affect the self-concept stem from a rejection by the various systems of which the society is composed. They include the historical system, the legal system, the medical system, and the social system, the psychological system, the taxation system, the economic system, the educational system, and so on. Of the systems that have rejected black people, the legal one has been the most devastating or destructive to the black self-concept. I don't know if it's legal. Do you guys agree that it's the legal one? I think the educational one is huge. Okay. Proposition 15. The major laws that have affected the black self-concept since 1619 are: 1, slavery law passed in Massachusetts in 1640s. 2, the separate but equal doctrine established in Massachusetts around 1849, later abolished. 3, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863. 4, 1875 Civil Rights Bill. 5, the Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, separate but equal doctrine. 6, the Brown versus Topeka Board of Education, 1954 decision. 7, 1957 Civil Rights Act. 8, 1960 Civil Rights Act. And 9, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Brings us to Proposition 16. Proposition 16 says, the best way to understand the black self-concept is to understand the experiences that help shape it and how the person defines his or herself. Proposition 17. Generally, black people tend to act according to the way that they define their self-concepts or the way they permit others to define their self-concept. Proposition 18. The black concept of self plays a large part in determining A, likes and dislikes of shades of color of people. I don't mean just black or white, but varying shades of color of black people. B, the selection of a mate. C, the selection of an occupation. D, the way the person relates to self and others. And E, the models that are selected to ape, quote unquote ape. Right? So this brings us to some recommendations, which is also the conclusion of this paper. I want you guys to take in those propositions. Do you agree with those propositions? Do you disagree? Tell me your feelings about those 18 propositions. And on the other side of this station ID, I'll do the recommendations, which are the conclusion. I'll be right back.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Chaka is here saying peace. Peace to Chaka. Peace to all of you for tuning in today. Make sure you hit the like button as you come in to the space. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell to be notified when I'm on, when I upload new content. So here are the recommendations. In conclusion, much more must be written, researched, and published in order that all of us may better understand what experiences are necessary and should therefore be provided to every black child and adult in order to facilitate the development of a positive self-concept. Toward this end, I recommend the following. 1, courses be established to teach the black self-concept in particular and the black personality in general. In a national study by Smith in 1971, no colleges or universities reported any course titled Black Self-Concept. Right, so that's something to look up today. Is there a course called Black Self-Concept? 2, that more research on the self-concept of successful blacks in comparison with the self-concept of non-successful blacks in selected fields be initiated. 3, that more research on black self-concept formation with larger populations be conducted. 4, that national, regional, and local conferences on the black self-concept be conducted. 5, that more theories on black self-concept development be advanced. 6, that more blacks who major in psychology begin to specialize in understanding the black self-concept. 7, that more research be conducted that compares test results and the black self-concept. 8, that more research be conducted that evaluates the black self-concept of black teachers in relationship to the self-concept of the black pupils whom they teach. That's a very important one. But the fact of the matter is, we have a lot of black husk teaching our black children in the public school system, but they're not, they're empty, right? They're empty. They're not really fully immersed, deeply immersed in self, in African self. And so therefore, they can't convey that to the pupils that they're teaching, right? They can't convey it to the pupils that they're teaching, right? 9, that more research be conducted that discovers the white teacher's concept of black people in relationship to the self-concept of the black pupils whom they teach. 10, more research be conducted that will specifically help black parents to teach and help their children build more positive self-concepts. 11, that more research be conducted on the combination or proportions of black experiences and white experiences that go to make up the black self-concept. And 12, I don't know why you need white experiences. And 12, that in-service education on the black self-concept be conducted for all teachers in the public school system on a national basis. So clearly this author has faith in the public school system. But I'm going to read these recommendations one more time again. What I want to ask as I read these recommendations again, for you guys listening with me, especially you guys live, but not limited to you guys. I want anyone who's listening to this broadcast to tell me, what do you define, or how do you define the black self-concept? What is your black self-concept? Right? How do you define black self-concept, and what is your, if you don't mind, what is your personal black self-concept of yourself? Right? So let me read this again. This is the recommendation. In conclusion, much more must be written, researched, and published in order that all of us may better understand what experiences are necessary. Should therefore be provided to every black child and adult in order to facilitate the development of a positive self-concept. Toward this end, I recommend, 1, that courses be established to teach the black self-concept in particular, and the black personality in general. A national study by Smith, 1971, no colleges or universities reported any courses titled Black Self-Concept. So this black self-concept that they're talking about in 1, this so-called course, really should be a curriculum. 2, that more research on the self-concept of successful blacks in comparison with the self-concept of non-successful blacks in selected fields be initiated. 3, that more research on black self-concept formation with larger populations be conducted. 4, that national, regional, and local conferences, the black self-concept be conducted. 5, that more theories on black self-concept development be advanced. 6, that more blacks who major in psychology begin to specialize in understanding the black self-concept. And, you know, this is not just true for the black self-concept in psychology, but black folks who major in other fields as well need to specialize in the black self-concept with regards to those other fields. For example, medicine, right? Biology, chemistry, mathematics, right? The pro-black perspective says seems pretty interesting. I'm not sure which question he's answering there, but he said seems pretty interesting. 7, that more research be conducted that compares test results and the black self-concept. I guess the idea being the more positive the black self-concept, the better test results would be. 8, that more research be conducted that evaluates the black self-concept of black teachers in relationship to the self-concepts of the black pupils whom they teach. 9, that more research be conducted that discovers the white teacher's concept of black people in relationship to the self-concept of the black pupils whom they teach. Now, my fix for this is forget about the white teacher's concept. We have an idea what that is. To instead become the teachers as black equals African people of black equals African children. All right? That's what needs to happen. 10, that more research be conducted that will specifically help black parents to teach and help their children build more positive self-concepts. That's a strong one. All right? You don't have to be a scientist to be a researcher. You too can do your research. I don't know where the brother Simba Bryant has disappeared to, but Simba Bryant posted on the Discord like his personal research into nation building and education as it relates to nation building, right? He's an engineer, by the way, but you don't have to be a scientist or an engineer or whatever. You could be just a regular person who just has an interest in understanding. How can we help parents, black parents, to teach and help their children and help them to build more positive self-concepts? If you want to do that research, you can join the Discord. Link is in the description and pinned at the top of the chat. Join the Discord and ask, how can I help? All right, with this concept. Number 11, more research be conducted on the combination of proportions of black experiences and white experiences that go to make up the black self concept. Now, ultimately, you don't want to be around these white folks to have white experiences, to be honest. But you can study their outlook on us. Now, you can use their outlook on us to help engage our children better and help our kids build more positive self-concepts, right? Number 12, that in-service education on the black self-concept be conducted for all teachers in the public school system on a national basis, right? That's the end of the paper. All right, how do you guys feel about the black self-concept? This paper by William David Smith. Did anyone answer what their idea of black self-concept is? Nope. All right, that's not a problem. So anyway, I want to thank all of you who were here. Pro-Black Perspective was here. Chaka came through. Rico Cooper was here. KW Don 7, as always, was here. Revolutionary Matron was here. Mr. Untouchable was here. He never answered my question if it was the paper he was asking about. But again, if it was about the paper, hop on Discord, ask me for it. You can get it. I think that was everyone. The Learning Curve with the Revolutionary Matron was here earlier also. Make sure to check out The Learning Curve, the new show on KWAZ Radio, hosted by the Revolutionary Matron. Check out the Pro-Black Perspective, hosted by Oni Tase. They'll be on tomorrow. I'll be back on Saturday for Shoot the Breeze, unless I get a tooth pulled on Saturday, but I should be back. And by the way, if you have Shoot the Breeze topics, go to the Discord, find the Shoot the Breeze category, post your topics for Shoot the Breeze for Saturday so that we can do that. In any event, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys on Saturday. You guys take care. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.